Hello, everyone. Welcome to our fundamental library demo. It's been almost 3 months since we had our last demo, and we are very excited to show you, our progress, what we've been doing in all the libraries. But before that, I just want to play a little video that our team, just not team, the development team, but some colleagues of ours created quickly. It's a very quick one just to kind of kick off the meeting, and then we will continue with our demo part. I hope you can hear the sound. The whole goal of this is just to convince more people to not only consume the library but also contribute. We really appreciate this contribution, and you will see in some of the libraries we have more external contribution. But yeah, let's get started. So the agenda for today, it's this. From the design update, we had Estella joining, but she doesn't feel well. So I'll just do a quick update. As we promised last time, we released the UI kit as part of Fundamental Styles. We gathered feedback, and she has been working hardly to incorporate all this feedback. So in the next release of Fundamental Library, Fundamental Style Library, you're going to have the next version of the UI kit. If you haven't tried, you can try it now, the older one. And any feedback related to the UI kit, it's very much appreciated and welcome. I mean, as any other thing that we are doing. But because this is done for the designer, so if you guys have any feedback, good or something that we should change, feel free to come to us, and we are listening. So the next topic is cross library, and I will quickly maybe ask Jenna to give an update. There's nothing much to be presented, but Jenna, do you want to say a few words?
Sure. I wasn't prepared to talk about this one, but so we updated our recommendations for how to include fonts and icons for external projects. We originally recommended that users, like consumers of our various libraries, got the fonts and icons from SAP Theming repository. And that proved to be a little complicated with setup and needing to understand Webpack and everything. So we altered those instructions, and they're in all the READMEs now for where to download that from a more public-facing SAP website. I think it's Experience SAP, something along those lines.
Yes.
But yes, so all the documentation is updated on that.
And the huge benefit is the size of the library really went down. Really went down because we were distributing all the fonts and all the icons for all the formats, and usually on the application side you would need one font.
So we had already stripped those out. So we weren't we've just changed our instructions for how to include those fonts and icons
on the application side.
Yeah. Yes. So we because we took out the fonts and icons I think several major versions ago.
Yes.
With post-CSS. Yeah.
And then now jumping to the libraries, and we will start with fundamental styles. And again, a little back to Jenna, as she was driving one of the major changes there, Storybook adoption. Jenna, do you want to say a few words as well? I mean, if you want to present something as well, but up to you.
I'll show Storybook when we get to the React side.
Okay.
But basically we've moved over to Storybook, which most devs should be familiar with. It's kind of the gold standard now for documentation, but it actually really simplified our lives with building in the dev environment and the documentation environment into the same setup. So it reduces the infrastructure and the dev time for creating new components so we can move faster and iterate without having to handle those sorts of things. And we got built-in visual regression testing, snapshot testing, and some accessibility testing that's using the Axe plugin, if you're familiar with that. And yeah, and we're working on adding themes to it for the documentation site. And feel free to chime in if I missed anything.
No, but that's been quite improvement for us because it's reducing the effort we spent of maintaining, testing, and documenting the components. So hopefully on the next demo, you will be able, I mean, we are planning to switch it very soon, like in the next week or so. But on the next demo, and then Jenna is going to show it on the React site as they pioneered first there. It's reducing the effort quite some on our side, which allows us to focus on adding more components or working on something more creative, right?
Yeah, it's also more attainable for outside developers to jump in and start contributing because it's a pretty familiar atmosphere for most outside contributors.
Yeah. So it's becoming like one of the main libraries using to create component libraries, and it offers also development mode where you can enable a lot of features that developers would appreciate for testing, and then also for anybody else as well.
So let me quickly jump in. Does it mean we are going to deprecate our existing API documentation and move to this fully?
Yes.
Well, in the fundamental styles, it's a lot of stuff were done manually, right? And now things are quite more automated. And as Jenna mentioned briefly, the testing and the documentation, they're basically the same source. There's no, testing pages and documentation pages. They're, I mean, at the end of the day, it should be the same thing. Maybe you can enable more examples for testing that you don't want to advertise as the, let's say, productive ones, but where you can test some edge cases and so on and so forth. But you will see Frank later on when Fundamental React presents how they've done it on their side.
Cool.
So now we can justly present. So I listed the components that we've been creating or refactoring in the last 3 months. So the one that are in black means we are not going to demo in fundamental styles, but we can demo in fundamental Angular later on because for some of them, it's good to see the interaction as well, rather than just the visual part. But there's also available in fundamental styles. They can be used and they're released. So as a first on my list is Mike. And Mike, are you ready to show the components?
Yes, I am.
You can go ahead.
So on the fundamental styles library, the only component that I have to present is the avatar, which is a reworked version of the now deprecated identifier component. The default styling has changed a bit. This shouldn't cause any breaking changes or issues with anybody's projects at all. But we've also added this little zoom icon, clickable button, which gives you another little identifier inside of your bigger identifier. And that's it.
Yeah, so this has been migration from the previous fundamental. In fact, there are two components: the image and the identifier as well. So this one, it's Fiori 3 component that is doing the same thing. The next, Ina, are you ready to present a few components on your side?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Let me know if you see my screen.
Yeah, we see the generic tile in the browser.
Okay, so we added a new component called generic tile, And generic tiles can be used to represent an app similar to the SAP Fiori Launchpad homepage. They can display different types of content, which are based on the data supplied by the app. They can contain an icon, a title, an informative text, KPIs, counters, and charts. When it comes to sizes, we have two sizes, large and small. The default one is large and is used for screens larger than 374 pixels. For smaller screens, you can use small tiles and apply the modifier class you see here. When it comes to layout, we have a header, content, and footer. The header is required and it contains a title and an optional subtitle. The title is required as well, and it can have up to 2 lines of text before it is truncated, or 3 lines of code if you omit the subtitle. The subtitle is optional and can have 1 line of text before it's truncated. And content and footer are as well optional. You can also apply a 2-column layout, which is splitting the header, the content, and the footer into 2 columns with a 0.25 rem vertical padding. And actually here we applied some colors to illustrate the columns as well as the header, the content, and the footer. And it's worth mentioning that all these dimensions, they are fixed, which means that the tiles will not grow as your content grows. And the first type of generic tiles is the launch tile, and it's using a numeric content. And numeric content can be in 3 sizes, large, medium, and small. And based on its size, you will see like combination of 4 characters, 6, or 8. And what you see here is launch tile with numeric content and launch icon. This is an example of a launch icon with a longer header. And here we combine the header and the content in one. This is launch tile with profile and large and small size, and launch tile with the logo. The next is the KPI tile. Again, here with examples with large, medium, and small numeric content. The next type is feed tile. Feed tiles can be used to show new notification content in a news feed.
Some trends are so influential. They can...
If there are no new notifications, the tile displays the most recent notification. Again, in large and small size. You can apply badges to your tiles. The next type is the slide tile, and the slide tile contains news headline, background image, the news source, and a timestamp. There is also a start and play button that appears on hover in desktop. In mobile, these buttons are always visible. The dots at the bottom of each tile identify the number of the pages they contain. In action mode, you can see a close button displayed on the top right corner of the tile, and the actions icon displayed in the bottom right hand corner. The last type of tiles is the wine tile. And wine tiles can be in floating and list behavior. So what you see here is the floating behavior. So the tiles, they go one next to another. And when there is not enough space, they go on the next wine. While list wine tiles, you have only 1 tile per row. You can apply badges. And you can also have an action mode with these tiles. The next component I'm going to show is the list. And actually the list existed before, but we added some new functionalities. So what you see here is the standard list, and it's just displaying some data. We added the standard list with navigation. So when all the items are navigable, we use the standard list with navigation, and these are links. But when you have a subset of list items that are navigable and not all the items are such, you can indicate the items that are navigable with a navigation arrow that you see here on the right side. And if a link is already visited, you can show it with this blue line on the right side. We added the standard list with action items, where all the items of the list are action list items. It's in default and compact size. And when you have a combination of standard list items and an action item, it looks like this. The next type we added is selection. These are list items with checkboxes that are available in default size, compact size. This is how it looks in borderless design. This is again if the items are links. The next thing is standard list with bywine. It's available in default, compact size, and also the content could be split in 2 different rows, as you can see here, where the second text item in bywine can have semantic colors and status like neutral, positive, critical, negative, and informative. These are the various combinations, like compact size with links, with navigation indication. This is the borderless design. This is standard list with bywine and selection. And again, like all the combinations, bywine, selection, and navigation. Message box. Message box is used to display simple messages, mostly text to the user. These messages could be standard, confirmation, error, success, warning, and information. This component, it inherits the look and the basic behavior of the dialog. It excludes the dragging and resizing capabilities. So what you see here is the default message box. These are the different types of message boxes: standard, confirmation, error, success, warning, and information. They come with these icons in the header. And in case you want to omit the icons, you can apply a modifier class that will remove the icons from the header. We also added the responsive behavior for the message box. And what this responsive behaviors provide is this so-called responsive paddings. So depending on your screen, you see here the paddings on the left and the right side are different. And the last component I'm going to show is the message toast. It's a small non-disruptive pop-up for success messages that disappears automatically after a few seconds. The message toast is always centered horizontally at the bottom of the screen. And it's the same on all devices. So this is just an example of what message toast is going to look like in styles. And unless you don't have any more questions, I can stop sharing.
Joanna?
Thank you.
So next on the list is Gratien. Gratien, are you ready to present?
Yes, I am. Let me share my screen.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so the only thing from fundamental styles, I will show you the toolbar, because toolbar is not ready yet in NGX. So basically we have the 4 types of the toolbar. One is the solid one, which basically has a fixed background color and set to the one which Fiori Free specifies. Well, I should start what is the toolbar and where should it be used. So basically toolbar can be used in in the combination with, for instance, table to provide an enhanced user experience. So that means inside the toolbar, you can put any actions or like CRUD operations related to a table. So as I mentioned, there is the solid type of the toolbar. Another type of the toolbar is the transparent one. This means the toolbar, the transparent one, has no background color. It's set to transparent, and also there is no border, bottom border. It's not set. Basically, by using the FD toolbar clear CSS class. The next type of the toolbar is the auto. Auto is a type of the toolbar which takes the color from the parent. So whenever, for instance, if the parent should be set to a black, then the toolbar also inherits that style for the background color. The last type of the toolbar is the info. Info has two states. One is the inactive, let's say, with the color of the same as solid one, but the toolbar, the info type can also have the active state, which change the behavior and display the color as on screen. The info toolbar is the special one because it should only be used as a form of information. So in this case, you can see the example that it should, let's say it displays the number of items being selected. So this is the role of the info toolbar. Besides of the main four types, there is one additional, let's say, modifier class, which indicates if the toolbar should contain the title, the text of size of H4, as shown in example. So this is the only, let's say, difference between the solid one and the toolbar with the text, with the title. Regarding to the toolbar, we have a spacer item. The spacer can be set to two states, either to fixed width or the auto width. Well, auto is designed by default. When you want to specify the spacer width, you have to set it, you have to add special modifier and set the width to, of the spacer. Basically, what the spacer in default mode does, it takes remaining space available for inside the parent. So in this case, the parent is the toolbar, and here, as you can see, the text is on the left and on the right because all of the remaining space is taken by the spacer. There is another toolbar item which is called separator. Separator should be only used to separate, as names suggested, the items between itself. So the idea how to use that, you can think of like the CRUD operations and the search operation, which the area is totally different of interest. So this is the place where the separator can be used. We have also two sizes of the toolbar. The one is the COSI and the compact mode. Compact mode is set by default, so if you want to achieve the COSI mode, you have to add an extra modifier. And last, the toolbar has a special functionality called overflow. So basically, this example doesn't show this like pretty precisely, but the idea is that when the toolbar has a lot of childrens, and the childrens are not fit inside the toolbar, then the childrens go to the popover. So as in this example, let's say we can imagine that we have a lot of buttons here, and all of the remaining items which are not fit, which couldn't fit to the toolbar content, it should go to a popover. So basically, this is the end of the toolbar example, and that's it from the styles and from me.
Thank you, Gretchen. And now we're going to Jedrzej, who's going to talk about the table, time, and time picker. Jedrzej, you ready? Yes, he is. But
Yes,
you're
I'm
muted.
completely ready.
Okay. We hear you.
Yes, so as you said, today I will present two components. The first is table, the second one is time. So the first, the table is actually a well-known component. It's a set of tabular data. It can display the data images and you can perform actions from there. So as you can see, as Gretchen said, every single table example is used with the toolbar at the top. So, okay, let's move on with first example. First example shows the default table. It's actually fully Fiori compliant. It follows, it's themable. I mean, the whole component, the table is themable. Yes, so this is the default table with the header and the cells inside the rows. The next example is the table without borders. So you can exclude the borders from the table component by adding the modifier such as no vertical borders or no horizontal borders. It could be added into the whole table, into only the header and only into the body. So as you can see here, we don't have the borders at all in this example. In this example, we don't have borders only on body. Between the cells inside the header row, there are some border, but they are 1 pixel, so it will be hard to notice them. The next one is example with the footer. It's also worth to mention that table can be used along with 3 modes. The first one is the cozy mode, which actually is the default one. The next one is the compact, and the condensed is actually the smallest one. We have also the interactive rows and columns. So it depends where you put the modifier, such as activeable or hoverable. If it's added to the whole row, then clicking on any cell will cause the row highlight. If user will put it only to the cell, then if someone clicks on the cell, the highlight is added only there. The same is for hover. So actually, if the hoverable modifier is added to cell, only to cell, then every single cell is highlighted on the hover. Otherwise, if user you add it to the row, then hovering any cell will cause the row highlight. Basically, we can also use the table with checkboxes. There is also some list functionality, which actually is named area selected. So if the checkbox is selected, it should mark the whole row as selected. We can use the table with pagination. The pagination is actually the external component. It's not really related to table, but it can use at the bottom. We have, of course, the CRUD operations that were actually mentioned before. So as you can see on the right side of the toolbar, we've got some filter dialog and also some ways to change the columns. So there is example how to use it and how to place it inside the toolbar, inside the table. The next one is responsive table. So we have a way to use the table in the desktop mode and as well in the pop-in mode. So all of the not that important information can go below. So as you can see here, we've got some rows such as status or date of expire in the bottom. It can be also used with the checkbox. We have a semantic row highlight. So if user wants to show that some option is valid or it requires some action, then it can highlight it. We've got the merge cells. As you can see, between those cells, there is no such thing as borders, but for other, there is a border between them. We have contextual menu. It can be added by perform some actions related to certain rows. We also have the a table with header menu, with menu in header. So as you can see, we can sort or add some filter directly into the rows here, into the columns. Sorry. The almost last example is with the table with fixed columns. So if there's some really important column, then it can be fixed. So even if there are too many columns to place it in one screen in the big desktop, then it's visible. And the last thing is the navigation indication state. So if some row should navigate somewhere and there's, for example, it can be used with some links, then it's great to use it. Or to show that, for example, the user right now is placed in this link with this row. Yeah. So from the table, it was all. I will go to the time right now. So the time is the component to select the time value, actually. It can be used to choose the hours, minutes, seconds, and the period of the day. So we have the three modes of the sizing. So the first one, of course, the default is the cozy one. It can be used in mobiles. As you can see, there is the hours with minutes. And in this example, there are the seconds added, and there is also the period of the day with AM and PM. We have the tablet mode. It can be done by adding the tablet modifier. Also, we have the compact mode, which actually lowers the time cells. I prepared also the way to use the scrollable mode. So it can be, it's much easier to choose the date when user can just scroll. Yeah. So that was all from my side in case of the styles.
Thank you, Yadre. So let me share my screen back just to recap. So the ones that were in black, you're going to see there later on. One maybe it's good thing to mention is that the effort or the work that has been done is not only one person working on that. You know, there are different people involved, including designers from our team, from other organizations. There are different also teams contributing, different members and different teams contributing to some of the components like the info label, object status, for example. What's let's say the next plan on our agenda? One thing that I mentioned in the beginning, it's switching to Storybook. And then in the next two releases, obviously we're planning to release the tree. The tree, it's already almost done. It's in the peer review. Table has been merged, but it's not yet externally released. It's just pending the release to be kicked. We need to refactor the notification reflecting the latest Fiori 3 design, and then all the other components that you see here. So then we are jumping to the fundamental Angular library. So as you know, or you may not know, we have two packages. We have core package in NPM and platform. So core is basically, we're giving basic component with all the options available. So the application developers have the freedom, to configure it, as much as they want. So there is a lot of flexibility, but then, as you know, with flexibility, it brings also a lot of things that you have to write. And then that's why there is a platform package where we're working with Frank's team, which he's going to talk a little bit more, but there the idea is one of the things is to ease the components that you can use. So basically it gives you already pre-configuration, so they can also be used with Meta UI. But more about this, I'll let Frank and their team talk about it. We can focus now more on the core side. As I said, in styles, in core, we also, some of the guys from Frank's team are helping and contributing for some components. On the core package, like the info label and the object status are two examples. But again, also designers are involved and many others. what we achieved, we migrated to Angular 9. We brought some of the components that you guys saw in styles. Some of them are not yet merged or not yet started, but they will be coming later on in the next weeks and months. So now we can maybe present some of the components in NGX. And then first in my list, it's Michał. Michał, you're ready to present some components?
Yep.
Thank you.
So, can you hear me? You can. So I will start with the dialog, also known as the modal window. So in NGX, there are 3 ways of creating the dialog. First is the template-based dialog. So we are declaring the template locally and we are using it to create the dialog. This is a nice, quick, and quite customizable approach. The second approach is the component-based dialog. So we are also declaring the template for the dialog, but keeping it in a separate component. This approach is more preferable when you, for example, have some additional logic that needs to be combined with the dialog that's being created. And we have the quickest way of creating dialog based on the JavaScript or the TypeScript object. It's not as flexible as previous solutions, but it's quick and it doesn't require you to write the template for the dialog. So except closing the dialog, we can also hide the dialog visually. So it will be still in the DOM, and also display the dialog in the loading mode with this nice loading indicator. Except that there are a lot of things you can customize using the, let's say, configuration of the dialog that you are passing when the dialog is being created. Those are just some of the examples. So we have the drag and drop, or the draggable dialog window, resizable. We can also configure it so the backdrop click won't close the dialog, only some specified buttons. There is also a way of providing the global configuration for the dialog, so you don't have to configure the dialog each time you are creating it. Just create and eject one global configuration that will be shared across all the dialog instances you are going to use in your application. There is, of course, some dialog positioning support. We have also this dialog in mobile mode. So it's taking the whole viewport of the device. This is some more, let's say, complex example. Of course, things like header, subheader, and the footer are customizable. By default, they use the bar implementation, but you can write your own code and make it as you want. We support also stacked dialogues, so displaying multiple dialogues on top of each other. And things like custom backdrops, custom containers. So you can like display it, let's say, anywhere where you want to. There are also a couple of more things, but I'm not going to cover them. I encourage you to go through the configuration object and see what's available. Next component is the menu. So we decided to create the menu as a component that you can attach to any other thing that will behave as a trigger for the menu. Here we have this most common approach, so attaching the menu to the button. So yeah, that's a classic drop-down with list items. Fiori Free menu supports the icons inside menu, list items, and the shortcuts. So it's always beautifully styled. There is also a separator and compact mode. And there is a way to create a nested menu. So you can create sub-levels of the menu. Of course, the menu supports fully the keyboard navigation. And there is a menu in mobile mode. So that's kind of cool because we managed to handle this, let's say, creation of new view because it's behaving in a different way and also it's displayed in the dialog without the need of creating any additional markup. So we just set the mobile true flag and maybe some additional config if you want to. And you can go with the same markup and display the menu in the mobile mode. So you can go between the menu levels. This is a nested menu. And the text of the click sub-level is going to go into the dialog header. Yeah, that's it. There is also busy indicator. It's been here before, but we decided to create or maybe add the wrapper functionality. So previously, the busy indicator was just a loading icon, but we wanted to give it a little bit more functionality. So we created a way of using it as a wrapper. So it gives you this nice background and indicator icon displayed in the center. And that's all. We also made sure that it matches the accessibility things support. Yes, and that's all from my side.
Thank you, Michał. Next, Ina, you want to continue with your Angular components as well?
Yes.
Thank
You see the info label screen?
Yes.
So info labels are primarily used to provide information on an object. Keyword, text, icons, and numbers can be used to easily highlight specific information. What you see here is the default info label. For info label with text, you can apply semantic color, and we have options from 1 to 10. How you can achieve it is basically you have this input property called color, and here you can provide a value from 1 to 10. Info label with text and icon, we have a type property, and when you set it to icon, it gives you an option to provide a value for the icon, the glyph. This is the example shown here. And info label can be with a number or an icon only. And again, you can use the same property type to specify which type you want. It could be numeric or only icon. Object status is replacing the label status indicator and badges, which is now inverted object status. It's used for representing a status, and it can be set to positive, informative, critical, and negative. If you omit this property, the default status will be applied. So what you see in the first example is object status with only icons. You can have it in only text or in a combination of text and icon. You can also provide semantic colors, and these are all the options we have. The object status can be clickable, and it's achieved by setting the clickable property to true. For inverted object status, all you need to do is set the inverted property to true, and it will give you the inverted object status. Again, with all the variations of only icon, only text, or a combination of an icon and text. What you see here is the inverted object status with generic indication colors from 1 to 8. And for watch design, you can use the watch property and set it to true, and it will give you all the variations of object status in watch design. And that's it from me.
Thank you, Ina. Jedrzej?
Yes, let me share my screen. Okay, so can you hear me?
Yes, let me see the panel.
Great. So the first component I will present is the panel. The panel component is a container for grouping and displaying information that can be collapsed to save the space on the screen. So the first example is the expandable panel. As you can see, the panel can be collapsed. It's done by default. It can be done by two-way data binding. So we can just pass some variable to expanded flag, or we can close it by built-in button. We have the fixed panel. The fixed panel is actually, it can be closed. So it's there's no much difference between them, but only this button. We have the compact panel. Compact panel is much smaller. The button inside is also small. And we have the fixed height content panel. So there is a way to put the fixed height on the content. So as you can see, here we have 100 pixels, and it does not go. It does not expand the panel more than 100 pixels. So it can be scrollable inside. The next one, I will present the calendar. Calendar was here before, but we had to actually migrated it to Fiori free. We added some functionalities and some modes. So as you can see, there is a standard calendar. That's the visual things are quite changed, but the functionality is the same. You can choose the date, you can choose the year. And the new thing here is that we can choose the aggregated year, so we can change the years more quickly. So if you want to jump by 200 years, for example, you can do it easily, like that. The next thing is the mobile calendar. We can use the calendar in landscape mobile mode. So as you can see, it's displayed in the dialog, in landscape dialog. We can also display calendar in portrait mobile mode. And right now we have the portrait dialog here. There are a few options that we can pass. We can pass them by also the binding. So we can show the week count. We can change the size to compact, and we can mark the weekends by some additional class. There is also a way to add the marking range days on hover. So it's easier to see what days are actually checked here or picked. It can be also switched on and enabled and disabled by passing the flag. We have the special days. You can use the special days flag actually by passing the special day number, and it can be found here. All of the list of the special days colors, and we can also apply the rule. So for example, here we have the weekends for the special days. So the day 7th and 1st is the special here. So if we mark the weekends, as you can see, the weekends are marked in this color. You can mark, there are some examples of it. So as you can see, we can enable and disable the marking of the days. We can change, customize somehow the year grid. So here, as you can see, we have the year mapping method, which actually returns the thing that should be written there. So here, as you can see, we have the year and the word, which is actually year. Also in aggregated here, it can be changed. So here we've got the year and the aggregated year. Also, we can change the way how it's displayed. So we can change the rows and columns number. So here, as you can see, we've got only 1 column and 8 rows here. And for the years, we have 5 rows and 3 columns. When on the default one, it's different. We have also the range selection calendar. I mean, it was before. We can apply also some disabled functions, disabled range end functions and start end functions. You can programmatically change the date, of course, by just using the 2-way data binding. You can change the day, which actually started from the weekend. So as you can see here, we've got the Monday at the first day in the week. By default, it's Sunday. It can be done by passing the number. So right here, as you can see, is the second one. You can easily change the internationalization, the names of the months and the days by passing the arrays of weekdays, months, and full months. Also, it can be achieved by passing the moment.js variables. So there is an example which shows actually how to achieve it. Also, all of those functionalities are propagated to date picker and datetime picker. So yes, all of those flags that are used inside the calendar are used also there. The calendar, it's really rare to see the calendar component, the standalone calendar components. It's mostly used in the date picker. Date picker looks like that, actually. So it's the calendar inside the popover, but it didn't change. Okay, and I think that was all from my side.
Thank you, Drake. And we're going now to Mike. Mike, you ready?
Yes, I am.
Cool.
So the first thing I want to talk about are some updates to the action bar. So visually, it now matches the Fiori 3 specifications. There were a few breaking changes. The order of elements in the layout have changed, and we've added this with back button input. The breaking changes aren't very complicated, so it should be fairly simple to adapt. I also worked on the breadcrumb. This component is now responsive. Breadcrumbs that extend beyond their parent container or the window will be collapsed into this overflow menu. We have worked on the combo box autocomplete so that as you start typing, the closest match will autocomplete in the input. The autocompleted text is highlighted so the user can easily press backspace or a different key to undo the autocomplete's assumption if needed. So this functionality that you're seeing here matches the autocomplete behavior you'll find in SAP UI5 or in your Chrome browser search bar. Additionally, the user can press arrow keys to focus options in the combo box results list and press enter to make a decision. And selected options are indicated with a changed background, and partial entries are allowed in the input. And the visual styling has been updated to some Fiori 3 standards as well. Another component I worked on was the multi-input. The multi-input is now responsive. So you can see if I add a bunch of options to this multi-input here, as I start to resize the screen, tokens are collapsed and this more text displays. And when the user clicks the more text, they see all of the options that they've selected. Additionally, they can use the arrow keys to scroll between, or to scroll to tokens that are hidden from view. if we filter in this input, then we're shown this show all button, which the user can click and the input is cleared and all the options are visible again. And in cozy mode, the user can, on a responsive screen, they can use their thumb to swipe the tokens left and right to see which ones are hidden. And that is all I wanted to demonstrate. Thanks.
And last but not least, Gretchen, you're here.
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, fine. Let me share my screen. So my presentation for migration part, I will start with the buttons. Sorry, I can't click that. So I started with the presentation of the types of the button. So basically, for the normal button, we have these types, starting from the standard, emphasized, ghost, positive, negative, attention, and transparent. The toggle one is coming, as Daniel showed you. It's scheduled for next upcoming quarter or quarter after that. Yeah, so basically the types, the button types should be used whenever you have the semantic, let's say, logic behind. So it's for the positive button, the simple usage would be to just accept any action, or for negative button is to just cancel an action or just discard any changes. The other type, we have the special menu, is the menu button. The menu button should be used as the component which displays some additional data. Basically, it contains the text and the icons with the special icon shown here with the arrow, caret arrow pointing down. So the menu button is also implemented with the semantic states as the previous one. The button supports two sizes: the one which is cozy mode, and second which is compact. And of course, as you saw previously, icon the button also supports icon. The icon can be passed by using the glyph property and the icon name, following by the icon name. So basically, if you have like special icons, you have to go to Fiori free icon sets and pass the name using this property. The button supports states, which is basically the selected states and disabled and focus states. This is a little bit, this example shows on to disabled state, but I'm going to fix it later. So I think that's most of it from the button perspective. Let's jump to another button, which is the segmented button. Segmented button is basically a wrapper around buttons, and the segmented button groups the button in a nice, in nicely ways. That means that the button which is on inside, let's say the inside of the segmented button, the margins and borders are cut off, so it matches like it. The buttons align to itself, like the blocks. So this is basically the idea behind the segmented button, and you can just imagine of how it can be used in your own applications. Yes, what else we have? We have the split button. The split button is kind of similar to a menu button, but the segment, the split button is built up from the two buttons. The one button which is on the left and the button which is on the right. If you click the button on the right, it pop-ups the menu with options, and those options is, let's say, some kind of action functionality which you can develop for your application. So what is the usage of this type of button? For instance, when you have a lot of actions similar to in terms of functionality, so you can group them in one place and just enable them by clicking to the arrow bottom. Split button also supports the semantic states as shown here. So as well, it's well, you can use semantic the same way as the button, the simple button concept. Also, split button allows you to pass your own icons, which will be displayed instead of the arrow down icon. And the split button allows you to programmatically open and close the menu. And I think that's it from the buttons. The last thing which I want to present is the select component. And this component was refactored by Frank. So basically, if I state something wrong, Frank, then you can correct me. So basically, select component is a straightforward component when you have a list of options. And from that list of options, you can select one of option, basically, which goes to the selected item. You can also search select options by keyboard. So right now I am typing A. And as you should see, the focus is on the apple right now. So when I hit enter, the apple is selected. And the same goes with the arrow navigation. So basically when we are on focused on the select and we type arrows down and up, we change the options regarding to what we have in the menu. Select supports two sizes for now. It's the default and the compact, and by default it's the bigger one. The compact is the smaller one. Also, it has a disabled mode and the read-only mode, which basically looks like this. Select also supports the semantic states as shown here. I will not explain it because it's very similar to what we have in button example. And you can pass custom elements to select. In this case, we have this cog which is spinning around, so you can enhance even further the user experience. Lastly, not lastly, but we have extend options. That means when you can pass additional template to an option list, which will display additional data about your item which you want to select. So as listed here, let's say we have the shopping list and we want to select vegetables or fruit, which has the less calories. So let's choose cabbage in this case. And as you can see, the selected option contains object instead of simple text or the number. So you can also use that as well for the value. And select also supports a mobile mode. The mobile mode is basically takes the full screen of your application, and it looks like this. So basically, it contains all of the functionality which the regular select has, but this time it just contains full screen space. Yeah, and you can provide the select max height option, which basically indicates if the select should display the scroll bar and at what point. The default is set to 45% of the browser's inner window height. So that is the default behavior, but you can override this. Also, you have the way to programmatically add options or remove them. So I already add this new option, but let's click again, and you should see the new option 3 has been created. Let's remove it, and now it's gone. Yeah, and the same you can do by the same programmatic way. You can open and close the menu and change the values. The change value is basically you have to check the documentation. What's the logic behind the changing of the value? Yeah, and that's it from me.
Grazie. Yeah, get the sharing part.
Yes.
Before moving forward, there were some questions around the theming. Do you guys see my PowerPoint back?
Yes, we see.
Yes.
I assume so. So before moving forward, just quickly to tell you, so each component that we are migrating in each of the library right now, it's themable. You know, we are consuming the cross-theming parameters from the theme designer, and then because of that, it makes the component themable in Styles, in React, and Angular. What we included in Angular now, and we have it in React as well, just to demonstrate. The thing is that you can switch to dark theme, and then the component basically will render, or not render, but change the colors reflecting the selected theme. And then I can pick, for example, the high contrast, black and white, and then all this will reflect. So this is basically all the components that were migrated. They are themable, and they basically take the colors. So our next step on the NGX side is now we are very close to release the table. The time picker that you saw in Styles, they are now under development in Angular side. We are also working on the step input and the toolbar, as I wrote in the chat. If there is already PR, it's almost ready. So these things will be ready very soon. We are expecting Angular 10 to be out in the next weeks. So hopefully in the release, after the next release, we are going to be migrating, and hopefully this will bring IV as part of the libraries as well. So we can also benefit there. And then some of the components that you saw in Styles, we're planning to as well migrate them slowly, not slowly, but as much as we can. That's in a nutshell in the core. So we'll jump to the platform, and then this is where Frank and his team will jump in. Frank, you're there, right?
Yeah, I'm here.
Should I keep sharing, or you want to take the sharing part as well?
Yeah, you can keep sharing, and then
Okay.
once I actually start sharing and so on.
Okay.
So thank you so much. And I just want to make disclaimer, this is not my team, but
Not your team, but the team that you're working with, and you're part of this team, right?
yeah, exactly.
It's
So,
Manav's team.
yes.
Yes.
So me and Kevin are going to actually show you a few things, and still even the platform, which I'm actually going to still explain over again what we mean by having platform layer on top of the core. It's still in a baby, and good news is that we're actually getting some new help. We got nicely funded, and those things will probably hopefully spin away faster than it was up till now, right? So, but again, what is platform? As you see, several Angular NGX core components where actually it gives developers some kind of freedom to develop components the way you want. You have close touch with HTML elements, you can actually change styles, and you have full flexibility, where platform is trying to actually target more application developer. And what application developer means is they want to actually assemble application really fast. They don't want to actually deal with too many implementation details. So we try to abstract everything out. And also, when you build large-scale application, for example, one procurement or guide buying, you try to be more restrictive as well, because the more you expose, the more troubles you have when you try to actually upgrade. So we try to be really careful what we expose and how. And at last, not at least, but at last, we also trying to add certain enterprise functionality, how to manage state and certain things with certain components. And of course, whoever works with the Angular and knows IATN, internationalization, you know that Angular up till now didn't give us any support for having IATN within the library. So we will show you later on with Kevin several approaches we took to be able to actually support IATN already within the library as well. And let me jump into the first point, and I will probably start sharing, is it might be probably interesting to some of you, is we got, let me start it up. We got fully functional license for a Gitbook. And if you don't know what is Gitbook is, it's a space where you are actually able to create documentation, share documents, even to write change logs, even we have everything automated. But this is actually a missing piece for the GitHub, where we have API documentation, which can actually help you to play around and tweak and work with certain components. Gitbook, the goal is really like to write certain like guides or any additional documentation that you want to actually see within the every single libraries as well. So whoever is thinking certain way like this, you can actually reach me out. We have full enterprise support. Since we actually open source GitHub library, we got everything for free. And right now, what we're actually using this is that, which actually gives me to jump into another point, technical and API documentation, is that sometimes when we try to somehow clarify what is the best way to somehow describe documentation, what content should be there, is that, so we actually created two spaces. And you can see is, or I would say, initially we tried to do everything in Wiki on GitHub. But in Wiki, in GitHub, you cannot do any comments. You cannot actually keep certain versions. You can actually see different variation, or there is no contribution at all. So this somehow give us some kind of review process where we are actually able to put together certain information, agree on it, and then when once we are happy, we are able to actually update the certain API builds as well. And the other things we're actually using, since as I told you, we are actually getting on board some additional resources. Some other important piece is to write technical documentation, because as I said, on application level, the most important things is how developers or how application developers work with the actual components, how complex it is, what level information are we able to hide and show. So we always need to actually align on component signature. Once we are happy with component signature, we try to play with this a little bit. Then we go down, we expand more and more details, where we try to somehow highlight certain things about internationalization, which we'll tell you in a few minutes, and certain things about accessibility as well. Because as you know, this topic about accessibility, it should be for certain dedicated people on its own, because the topic is so large, and I would say it's impossible to track all the different ARIA tags or keyboard navigation or whatever is necessary for accessibility for one developer. So we try to actually consolidate all the information and put those information into the technical docs as well. And one of the things when I actually jump outside of this is that, which gives me into another point, is kind of demo a little bit, is that the biggest pain point in the building application is probably working with forms. And as you know, we're actually rendering invoices, requisition, task, project, and you might be able to render 20 fields, 30 fields. And you as an Angular developer needs to manage states, validation, internationalization, layout, and those things all together. And not everybody in the team is CSS expert. So again, in this specific case, we try to hide as much as we can. So instead of going, for example, I don't know, I just pick design the component, going directly with the HTML code where even right now, developer has tons of freedom to do whatever he wants. We try to abstract those things out to, well, a reusable component, which kind of looks like this. I can actually show you later in the code, but what we try to put here is certain structure into this, because at the end of the day, you have one entity you work with, and this entity supposed to actually represent the form. We call it form group, and this form group supposed to manage different set of layouts. And even right now, we have some simple layout to support 5-zone layout, top, bottom, left, right. We'll be implementing soon all the Fiori 3 floor plans that are available. So you are able to actually plug and play different layouts. So developer doesn't need to even think how and where to set and tweak certain field to be able to render this field in certain position. All these things should be hidden. Then under the form group, we have form fields, and form field manages everything starting from label, hints, error messages, all the different variations you can actually think of. You can actually say, or you are able to pass the IDs, label, placeholder, all these things are able to come down to actual form controller, which is our widget on the form level. And if you think about it, all the different form share exactly the same things. They have IDs, they can be editable, they can be read-only, disabled, and a bunch of different attributes or states. And we try to abstract those functionality out into form field. So once you're actually implementing your widget, you don't need to actually worry about it. So at the end, when I actually open my WebStorm, is to be able to render, for example, form like this, where I want 2-column layout with hints and validations, where if I actually delete everything, I get message right away. I don't want to even work with HTML because on the application level, it's so time consuming because I want to keep assembling things. At the same time, those forms should be able to handle read-only state, editable state, create state, or if maybe in the future, even list state with search at the top, right? So once I have this in the code, I just need to specify a few things where I just specify a form group. I say this form group is multi-allowed. I can also pass, or even I don't really need to form group on the top level because maybe I want to do some additional things on top of it. And I can even pass object, which is coming from, for example, from the backend system. And this could be my invoice. And using all this information, I can actually pre-populate everything. And I don't need to even initialize everything. All these things is done inside the form group. And of course, as I said, on the form group, I can only specify that this is my ID, or even ID can be maybe extracted from the field itself. It has a hint. I can send it to left, right, up, and down. With the actual floor plans, there will be more probably zones to actually place your widget. I can actually set certain validators. As you know, in Angular provides pretty good support for validation as well. And all these things, or I would say the only things that is left is just to place my control here, nothing else. And even I can actually use default form controller that is created as a part of the form field. So I don't actually need to initialize form controller or any kinds of values on the application level at all. And it works with ng model, form controller, it doesn't really matter. So this way, I can configure everything. I can even specify, hey, I want you to occupy, for example, 8 columns instead of 3, right? Or 5 or 6. And all these things is really abstracting out the way we work with forms. And I don't need to actually worry about validation, error management, all these things are ready. And if you're actually reading how the actual specification about the form should look like on the theory level, you know that it's not only about those hint messages, but it's also when you have more errors, you're supposed to be actually pop up certain dialogue here, and you should be able to browse to the errors as well. So all these things will be implemented in the form group level, because now we can actually distribute it nicely, different responsibility to different pieces, and it will be way easier to work with. And of course, error management is something you want to actually handle on the application level, right? Because you cannot actually, not really error management, sorry, internationalization, because the way I call the field, the way I say that this field is required or mandatory, or you want to show some specific message, this is something that should be coming from application. So this would also support this little feature, but again, Kevin is going to tell you more about it, is that as you define your own validation errors, those validation errors, the validation error itself, we are actually broadcasting these things out to the application level, and you're actually able to specify or translate any kinds of message you want. And again, this is just because there's certain lack in support in Angular that they don't support any kinds of internationalization inside or for the Angular library itself, right? So, and this will be super easy as well, because you as an application developer, you just, for example, specify different layout manager that you want to work with object details or list page, or I don't know what other floor plans are there. And you will not be able to even play with all those underlining diff elements and span elements and classes, because all these things will be abstracted out. And in the future, once your application will be upgraded, it should be pretty straightforward, because since we are more like, I would say, restrictive, we'll be able to use, for example, Angular schematic to actually upgrade your application nicely and seamlessly without actually doing anything on your side. So since I was talking also about internationalization, let me pass it to Kevin, and he will tell you more about our IATN approaches, because it wasn't easy, but we found a few things how we can actually support internationalization inside library itself that you publish into npm repository. Kevin,
yeah.
Are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
So let me start sharing.
Okay, let me share my screen. All right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right, so talking about internationalization or I18N, when developing our library, we're very conscious in how we can make this I18N available to our end users. So to start off with, we're using the Angular I18N directive, or we're expecting that the application developer is using I18N directive, the Angular I18N directive, when doing internationalization. And so with that knowledge, when we're developing our components and our system and our framework, we're trying to be cognizant of allowing the end user to change strings in our components. And we do that by first by having, let's see, where is it? First, by exposing strings via property bindings. So you see, like here, we have a property no selection label, and we try to have expose all the internal strings in our components as either properties, or we allow we provide child components, which you can attach the I18N attribute to, right? So in this case, for radio button group, it has a name that can be added I18N designation to, and its children have this I18N, right? Oops, sorry. Additionally, we know that sometimes internationalization can't all happen on the front end. For instance, let's say you need to access a backend service for your choices, right? So we try to allow the flexibility for the end user to either have these child components or child elements, or they can pass a list of values to the radio group, and the radio group will render those. Of course, doing it this way, we're expecting the user to be able to handle the translations, and that whatever backend service they're accessing is able to translate the values that they want to pass through. Right. Let's see. Frank had mentioned about the form and form groups and how we handle errors, right? So we've tried to architect the form group so that we can externalize all the error strings in a template. So I think he showed you this example where we have this ng template that we give a name to, and within this template we can add these span tags, which can then we add the I18N directive for translation, and this template gets passed through the form group through a property called I18N strings. So here, again, we're trying to provide the user an easy way to expose their error messages that can be translatable easily by their application, right?
And I would just add to it is like we found interesting feature of Angular CLI I18N command is that when you run it, and if it's able to locate some I18N markers within your library under node modules, it is able to externalize them and save them into those XLS files. So, and we're actually using this where for certain components, we decided we want to use I18N markers, but for some we don't want to, and we have certain approaches how to actually decide this way or this way. And then later on, what we expect is we will actually ship, let's say, a data table. Data table has its own strength, right? You can have certain high order components like dialog, and we'll be able to ship those XLS files as a part of the library, and using schematics, we'll be able to add those XLS files directly into your application. So everything will be there and provided as a part of the library support.
Yeah, so exactly so our plan is if there's any strings that, very common strings like maybe submit or, things that we want, like in large or complex components where there's internal strings that are required, we want to kind of create a library of our own translations. And then, as Frank said, using schematics, be able to patch the application's XLF files with these library of internal strings.
Because you want to translate it only once, and if internationalization team spent a week translating one component into 5 different languages, then you don't want on every single page, every single application team to do the same thing. So you want to actually ship those translations. And of course, Angular doesn't give you these options yet, but we are able actually to do this and have this working out and publish and ship these XLS files as a part of the library. Okay.
So I think that's it.
Okay, so I will just sum this up. We either actually work with labels, and this is only for those components where there's only one label, like drop down where we have no selection string or something like this. For components like those high order components where you can have multiple labels and you want to actually expose label 1, label 2, and no data label and so on, we want to use those IATN markers. This is second. Third approach is this declarative approach where we are enabling you every single component to be initialized from the data, where we either allow you to pass your data source or list of values. But this is not really for internationalization because all these data points are coming from the database. But we have this declarative approach where these components can be assembled within this HTML tags as well. And at last, this is this form, right? So these are 4 like different approaches how to actually tackle internationalization inside Angular library, which doesn't support it yet. And we don't want to really use any NGX translate or any kinds of variation which are out there. And we want to stick with Angular because then moving from one IATN library to another, it's a nightmare. Okay, Dino, this is pretty much it from platform side right now.
Thank you, guys. Let me share back my screen, maybe not for long. And this is where we're gonna jump to fundamental React.
Oh, we have some questions. Hold on. Look, we have some questions.
You can answer them in the chat meanwhile.
Okay, good.
I suppose Jenna is gonna start first, or somebody else from the team?
Yeah, I've got it. Can I share, please?
Yes. All yours.
Thank you. Alrighty. So, I'm just going to give kind of a brief overview of what we've been working on, but I wanted to start with thanking all the outside contributors we've had lately. We've had a bunch, which has been really great and nice for moving forward. Secondly, I wanted to talk about Storybook. So we briefly talked about it earlier, and sorry I wasn't ready to show it off then, but here's the fundamental React documentation site. So this should look pretty similar to how it looked before. We tried to style it pretty similarly, but so if you look at our doc site, we still have the show code. We're working on getting the different theming options that you saw in Angular into these bars. So yeah, you can see all of our examples, and then for React, it creates a prop table. Obviously, this isn't necessary in styles, and I believe Angular will have a different sort of setup for how Angular works since you don't use props. We've got a table of contents over here, and everything's responsive. So this is, and you can use subfolders. It's a pretty nice development experience. And for the for the developer side of this, this is actually what it looks like. You can look at both the doc side and Canvas, which is useful for, oh, I think I stopped my server, but I was going to show you, there's an accessibility scan, and this one was showing that I had one error, and it's because I don't have an ARIA label on this button. So it's a really nice feature to have when you're developing so that you can catch those small automated, those accessibility issues. Obviously, it's not going to catch everything because you can't automate all of this, but yeah, and then we can go in here, we can see all the different variables, high contrast black, high contrast white, and we have these for everything. We automated some visual tests. You can see it in different viewports, right to left. So it's pretty good for the developer experience. Yeah, that's all I really wanted to show is Storybook. Another big thing is we were able to upgrade to Popper 2.0 without actually making any style changes inside of Fundamental React. So we have that, it's in PR right now, but it's about to merge. It's been approved, which is really exciting. But I bring this up because this is kind of an important thing that's going to come up for all the libraries as we move to Popper 2. As the support for IE11 starts dropping across the web as a whole, we are still planning on supporting IE11, but with Popper 2 and React overlays working underneath the hoods, they are actually using, they're expecting object assign and array find and promise to be available on the page. which is not compatible with IE11. So we've added some instructions for how to add a polyfill onto your page to get these to work. And we've added those into our storybook. But I think that's just kind of the way things are going to be going forward. We always did try to avoid using global polyfills, but there's not much we can do about a node module requiring these things. So this is where we're at right now, and left some instructions there. Otherwise, new features, we've had a lot of improvements and a lot of work on the date picker, the new today button. There was a couple other features for changing what day of the week it starts with. General accessibility improvements have happened at both the fundamental styles level and here. And then we've just done some general bug fixes and kept up to date with fundamental styles. And by keeping up to date, I mean we've made changes for all the breaking changes. We have not implemented all the features or all the new components that you see in fundamental styles. But we have things like that in our backlog and are always open to contributions if anyone is looking for a component that's not there. So yeah.
In your library, it's the most, the library with the most external contribution as well, which is a good thing.
Yeah, it's really nice. It's great how many people we've had. Yeah, but that was all I wanted to say about React. I don't know if anyone else on the React side would like to say anything.
Yeah, I just to reiterate what Jenna was saying there. I do want to once again call out the polyfill issue that Jenna had mentioned there. More and more libraries that are out there in the NPM world are expecting that if you need IE compatibility, that the consumer will be doing the polyfill, and so we are a consumer of a number of other libraries, and eventually other consumers will be consuming fundamental React as well. So this will all be passed down to the consumer. This will likely happen in the other libraries as well. Maybe Angular is already doing that polyfill for you. I'm not sure, but I think you're going to see similar things in those libraries as well.
Thank you, Brent. And your team is always inspiring the other libraries as well. So it's quite a valuable part of the fundamental library ecosystem. And then now we can switch to questions from the audience that, apart from writing, you can raise your voice and ask questions. We'll try to answer. If not, we can follow up as well. If you want, I guess you would need to unmute in case you muted in the beginning. Yes. No questions? Nobody want to ask directly? Okay, you guys, know how to reach us. So these are a few channels that either you can watch, you can ask, or you can subscribe for some use. I would like to thank everybody who directly or indirectly contributed to fundamental libraries. I can't even count all the people. And I want to thank also to all the stakeholders. We have contributors and stakeholders at the same time. All this feedback and talks are really important for us to shape up the libraries in a better way. It's all created for, being consumed by everybody who needs SAP look and feel, but picked Angular, React, or Vue as a framework or library to build the applications. Hope, I guess, to see you in 2, 3, 4 months from now. And I hope you guys, everybody, it's safe and healthy and inspired more and spending more time home with the families. Hope it's a positive thing. And yeah, that's it from my side. Bye, guys.
Bye.